Hello, everyone. Welcome to DIVERSEtalks presentation, Voices Out of Violence. My name is Andrea Canales, and I'm the Director of Community Development here at DIVERSEcity Community Resources Society. Before we start, I would like to engage in one of our standard practices here at DIVERSEcity, which is to take a moment for a land recognition as a way to ground us on today's purpose, while actively recognizing and paying our respects to the first peoples of the land that we're in. Part of our practice has also been to shift away from the built-in desire of getting things perfect, and instead engaging with the discomfort of not really fully knowing and our responsibility to keep learning as a must requirement for our work. Therefore, as I put forward the following land recognition, I do it with the awareness of the vast and never-ending learnings the world needs to engage with. DIVERSEcity Community Resources Society recognizes that our work takes place on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of the Simiahoo, Katsi, Coquitlam, Kwanlan, Quaquate, Musqueam, and the Sawasan First Nations. The knowledge and traditions of these communities are significant in providing context to the work that we do, and DIVERSEcity recognizes the importance that reconciliation has in building truly inclusive and strong communities. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Our panel discussion today, Voices Out of Violence, working together to support survivors across cultures, is in recognition of Victims and Survivors of Crime Week 2022. Our distinguished panel will discuss issues around supporting survivors of violence, especially women and children from across cultures, through a lens of cultural safety, compassion, and respect. Let's discuss how we can meet people where they're at, while supporting them access the care and healing that they deserve, while also supporting service providers delivering these services. Now, I would like to introduce our amazing panelists. After I share all of their names, I'll be asking each of them to take a minute to introduce themselves. First, we have our very own Richa Karkee, who is the Manager of Violence Prevention Services at DIVERSEcity Community Resources Society. Next, we have Samantha Gray, Program Director and Human Trafficking Project Lead at Surrey Women's Center. Next, we have Rosa Lenartiaga, Director of Clinical Practice at Battered Women's Support Services. Then we have Syma Nehal, Regional Manager for Nisa Homes in Vancouver. Next, we have Zainab Ibrahim, a graduate student with 7 years experience in the sector, including at DIVERSEcity and Nisa Homes. Thank you once again to our amazing panel for being here. And now we're gonna pass it over to Richa to give us a brief introduction.
Thank you, Andrea, and good morning, everybody. Really feeling grateful to be part of this amazing panel alongside amazing panel members as well. I'm really looking forward to the learning that comes out of this space today. And so my name is Richa. I am the manager for violence prevention services at DIVERSEcity. I identify as she and her. My main introduction is that I'm originally from Nepal. I moved to Canada when I was 19 years old, and so I consider myself a recent settler to Turtle Island. And in moving to Canada, I realized that history of colonization is not always visible to newcomers, and so we have to work to uncover the real history. For me, it is important that I continue to work towards decolonization, not just in my work, but in my ways of being as well. I want to share that in moving to Canada, I experienced duality of culture as a youth and did not always find spaces that I fit into. Thankfully, this has changed over time, but it's a process. And I truly believe that settlement is a journey, and I continue in my own path. And so my hope through my work is that we're able to support clients through their journey here in Canada. In my current role, I have the privilege to work alongside an amazing team, and we are working from the perspective that newcomers and racialized communities, and especially women identifying individuals, face some form of violence in their lives. And so in addition to providing intervention-based support services, the hope for our portfolio, and I think as an organization as a whole, is to address systemic factors to prevent violence as well. And this, of course, will take a lot of time and a lot of collaboration, but the hope is to work towards it. And so, yeah, that's my introduction, and lovely to be here.
Thank you so much, Richa. Next, we have Samantha.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Samantha Gray. I use she, her pronouns, and I am Assiniboine, and I come from the Arteaga First Nation, which lies on Treaty 4 territory, otherwise known as St. Luda, Saskatchewan. I just completed, as of yesterday, my Bachelor of Social Work at the Vancouver Island University. Professionally, I have predominantly worked in the anti-violence field, supporting individuals who have experienced gender-based violence. I have a fierce passion for feminism, public education, community engagement, and anti-oppressive approaches to frontline work. I am currently the program director and the human trafficking project coordinator at Surrey Women's Centre, which is BC's largest community-based victim services. And I am very happy and humbled to be contributing to this conversation. I'm very interested in this topic as I am professionally and personally committed to finding anti-oppressive and culturally competent ways to serve survivors of violence. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, Samantha. Syma?
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Syma Nehal. My pronouns are she and her. And first, I'd like to acknowledge that I am working from the lands of the Karkee, Semiahmoo, and Kwantlen peoples, and that we are appreciative of the fact that we are able to work from these lands. And we always keep this in mind when doing our work. A brief introduction of myself. I'm currently the regional manager of Nisa Homes Vancouver. I have been with Nisa Homes since 2019. If anyone is not familiar, Nisa Homes is an organization. We are a transition home for women and children fleeing domestic violence. And we try to provide as many culturally sensitive supports as we can, resources and referrals. That is what we strive to do. And I think that it's amazing that we have an amazing group of people here today, all of whom we work with, all of whom we refer our clients to. And I love that we are looking at a collaborative approach to help our clientele. I won't say too much because I know everybody wants to get on with the discussion, but I'm super excited to be here and would love as many questions as possible about our organization, our approaches, and how we can all work together. And more than questions, I would love ideas from the participants as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Syma. Rosalena.
Thank you, Andrea. My name is Rosa Lenartiaga, and my pronouns are she and her. I am an immigrant from Mexico and a settler in this unceded territory known as Vancouver. I have been in Vancouver for 25 years, and I work with Battered Women Support Services as the Director of Clinical Practice. I have been with BWSS for almost 18 years. I feel like a senior there. And people ask me, how come you have been doing this work for so long, right? And the reality is that I think I'm going to do it until the day I die, because the gender violence issue is endemic, an epidemic, and we know that with COVID, the cases increase. And we have witnessed how now in the States with the rights that women have fought for so long, right? The rights to have access to reproductive justice are being threatened. So we take 5 steps forward and then we get pushed back another 5 steps or more. And so I am here just to continue doing this work. And during the 18 years that I have been working at BWSS, I have created many programs for Indigenous, Black women, immigrant women who really address the oppression that we experience because of our social location. And I'm doing this work again because I want to affect change and end violence against all girls and women, because that's the area of my work. and where my heart is. So I'm very happy to be here, and at BWSS, I supervise the counseling team, the community-based victim services team, among way other things I do. So yeah, I'm happy to be here and to talk more about our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. And last panelist, we have Zainab, please.
Thank you, Andrea. Good morning, everyone. This is Zainab. I'm joining today from the unceded traditional territory of the Karkee, Syma, and other Coast-Salish people. Thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for the invitation. It's such a pleasure to be with other great panelists. Really looking forward for the conversation that we'll be having today. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Iraq, and I moved to this land back I think back in 2009. So it's been like 13 years. I'm currently enrolled in the Master of Social Work program at the University of Victoria. And for the past few years, I've been mainly working with migrant communities, specifically women and children and youth. And I would say for the past 6 or 7 years, I've worked with marginalized and racialized women who have experienced abuse or intimate partner violence, and children. I also support children who have been who witnessed or experienced trauma or violence. In these roles, I've always did have different roles, and I did wear different hats. I've definitely been doing frontline work as well as been in leadership positions and advocacy. But regardless of my role, my practice has always been rooted in anti-oppressive and decolonial approach. Yeah, so I've actually worked in both, as mentioned earlier, Nisa Home and DIVERSEcity. So I know Syma and Richa, and so good to see them today and everyone else. And I recently joined the Vancouver Island Counseling Center for Immigrants and Refugees, and I serve there as a board member. So yeah, really looking forward for the conversation today. And more than talking, I'm also looking for hearing and the learning, as mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. And I'm going to state the obvious. What a powerhouse panel we have here today. In bringing forward Syma's and Zainab's invitation, please bring forward your ideas, your questions, and any other things that you want to share with all of us. We are now going to move on to the question section. So I'm going to put forward a question, and I will invite the panel to step in and provide their insights. Okay, here we go. Our first question is, what do you see as added barriers for newcomer and racialized BIPOC communities when it comes to accessing supports? What has been your experience?
I can jump in and answer if that's okay. I think with the clients we support and work with, one of the biggest barriers, which is a very broad one, is the cultural sensitivity piece. And I think we see that across the board with all of the agencies that we are trying to work with and refer them to and are trying to support them. But I think there needs to be culturally sensitive and specific services available. So I know we have a lot of services in our community. There's counseling, there's settlement services and everything out there. But are we catering to the specific needs of the people who are supporting? I think that's a question that we need to ask across the board. And I know that including in that, I see a lot of translation services that are needed in various agencies and various parts of the system, which does create a lot of barrier for the clients accessing those services. That's just one example. I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that, but that's one of the biggest barriers that I've seen is just not having those types of services available.
Thank you, Syma. If it's okay, I can also add something quickly. I think it's also very important to name the intersecting identities of marginalized women. And so, which, most likely will make them more, subjected to, more vulnerable to violence. And so, as Syma spoke about cultural competency and culturally safe services, and just one thing I want to add here, I've worked with Muslim women, and one of the biggest barriers is when it comes to like Islamophobia. Many Muslim women don't want to seek help because they don't want to feed into the stereotypical narrative of Muslim women being like submissive, Muslim women being abused or oppressed, or like Muslim men being violent. And so this is one of like the biggest barriers that, and I'm talking about, you know, specifically Muslim women because I've worked with Muslim women. There's obviously like, you know, systemic discrimination when it comes to lots of like victims and survivors don't trust systems when it comes to like the medical system, the legal system, you know, when it comes to also like MCFD or like any kind of system, or like even RCMP, they don't trust the system because they're not being taken seriously, or they're being like dismissed. And so it's very hard for them to actually reach out and seek help. And even like navigating these systems is such a like huge barrier. It's not easy to, there's like, they're not accessible, and they're not really, some of these services are not really like, and they're provided in English. So there's this language barrier as well. So yeah, I'm just gonna stop here and allow others to contribute.
Yeah, if I can piggy, oh, sorry, do you want to go?
No, go ahead, Samantha.
Okay, I just want to piggyback off of kind of what was just mentioned about for newcomers that have experienced state violence or coming from places where the state is corrupt and overtly oppressive, and just as an organizational level, just being very mindful of the other, you know, the state agencies that we interact with when we're supporting survivors, and just not putting so much emphasis on that, you know, you have to report in order to get accountability through the criminal justice system, and really being mindful of how oppressive those systems like police, like the criminal justice system can be towards racialized communities. So I'm really glad that that got brought up. Another thing that acts as a barrier is kind of our conceptualization of healing on an individual level, and kind of dismissing collective ways of addressing healing. And so when we're thinking about programming and thinking about counseling and things like that, are we thinking of it from a westernized standpoint, or are we being more inclusive of other cultural understandings of the healing journey and how that can look like for survivors? Thank you.
Yeah, and if I can jump in there, like definitely what Samantha said in terms of how we define healing, but I was also thinking about trauma and like how trauma manifests itself in our lives. And I think, you know, we're all working so hard to be trauma informed, right? Like this is something we're striving towards, but I wonder sometimes we may not fully understand the trauma that many newcomer communities or racialized communities carry with them, and that continues, and how it shows up in their lives. And so sometimes behavior that seemed challenging or difficult may be a trauma expression in response to trauma as well. So really being able to meet clients where they are is very important. And I was just reflecting on too around just this piece around cultural sort of responsive practices and how we respond to clients, and connecting that to barrier to access. And I think what is important for me personally is this notion of cultural humility, maybe that, you know, there's diversity within newcomer communities as well. People have different immigration status, different journey, how they got to Canada, maybe different access to formal education. I think of how if I were to stand in front of another Nepali person who shares similar identities as me, her access to barrier to access might be very different from mine as well. So really keeping that in mind. And really resonating with what Syma said earlier about language, linguistically appropriate services. And we often think about sort of, you know, clients' ability to access support in their own languages, but I also think it needs to shift to system-based responsibility as well. So are we capable of responding to clients' level of English? Do we have patience and capacity to listen to those who don't speak the same language as us, or speak English the same way as we do, right? And so I think really shifting that to our responsibility and being better able to respond to clients as well. So I'll stop there.
I want to echo what everybody has shared. That's also my experience. And I just want to add that, you know, a lot of us as migrant people, newcomers come into this land with this idea that Canada is progressive, there is a multiculturalism, and then we come to find that this is a colonized land and that a lot of the legal systems, institutions are rooted in that idea of colonization, and that one of the foundation of those ideas is that some women deserve protection, which is mainly from the mainstream group, and then some women deserve violence, that is indigenous, Black, and racialized people. So under that foundation, we see that many institutions, government respond in that way. So we as workers, I think we need to be aware of that, right? To support the people who are accessing our organizations and to understand the level of barriers, right, that they are going to face. And we know that not all service providers look at that, right? That a lot of service providers have this expectation that people have to fit into this cultural way of being, and we see it when we deal with police, with the Ministry of Children and Families. So I think that, again, each of us in our different organizations need to be aware of these layers, right, and the expectations. And I know that now there is a trend that many organizations, including institutions, police, they said, oh yeah, we work from a trauma-informed approach. And when I ask, how does that look? It's just the theory, right? But they don't really know it in the approach. And a lot of newcomers are here because they are escaping, as someone mentioned, from violence, and maybe they have experienced multiple traumas, right? And we want to apply a Western approach where we are supposed to give 2-3 solutions and the person is supposed to move on and adapt, right? And that's something that is a huge barrier for many families. That's me.
Thank you, everyone, for your great insights. And continue with that conversation, given how key it's going to be for us to really look at the systemic issues in the intersecting factors and intersecting identities that brings someone to seek services. I wonder, how do you see the power of collaboration playing a role in providing care for survivors? How, in the second part of the question is, how can we better collaborate across various sectors and even among our organizations?
I think in terms of collaboration, I kind of mentioned this in my introduction, but I think it's super, super important that we are all working together. I know with the pandemic, I feel that everyone became a little bit more segregated just because of not being able to see each other in person and all of those types of things. And I feel like there's some of the resources got left to the wayside. So we're not really fully sure what the resources are that are available to our clients in the community at this time, but we're starting to get a better idea of that. I think that organizations need to be super active in terms of inviting other organizations to their events, to their panels and discussions as we're doing today. I think it's very helpful to know what we are doing individually so we can collaborate together. I think information sessions, sessions on educating other organizations on what our resources are, because not everybody always knows the extent of the services that are provided. I can say that I don't know what is provided by all the organizations that are here today. I know specific things that we worked with, but I do think that because our clients have such specific needs and multiple barriers, we do need to work together, because not any one organization can actually, there are limitations. Every organization has limitations, and we need to work together to fully address all of the issues that are at play.
And I think, just to add on what Syma said, I think definitely collaboration is very impactful, and it brings so much richness and depth and different perspectives. And it could potentially reduce some of the barriers that we mentioned earlier. And I genuinely think this work is very relational, meaning that it cannot be done without building these relationships that we're talking about across all service providers and with the people that we're working with. And so having these connections make it really like easier to the victims and survivors to, you know, navigate services and potentially reduce some of like the confusion, the frustration, and sense of betrayal they're experiencing. And so, for example, if we have like, I don't know, transition home providing shelter for, you know, for a woman, but they don't have the service for providing, you know, someone accompanying the woman to the court, let's say, it's really important to find like a complementary service that, you know, bridge this gap. So yeah, I think it's super important, and it should exist to, you know, make this work more impactful.
Rosa, I see.
I forgot to turn off my microphone, but I can go. Yeah, so I just love collaboration. I have done it for so many years, and we cannot be everything for everybody, right? And all of you work in different regions, have different areas of expertise. Maybe there are different languages that you provide that we don't provide. So I find that throughout the years, creating networks and actually even having people I know within a transition house or within different organizations, then it's very useful, right? Because sometimes I have someone who needs immediate support accessing a transition house, and then I call someone I know and I said, you know, I know you have to ask all these questions, but this is urgent. Is there a way that we can support this family? And I know there is a housing crisis, and finding permanent housing for people is really hard, but sometimes creating connections with some housing providers has been helpful for me to find some temporary or permanent housing. So yeah, collaboration is huge, and also to me is a way to challenge systemic oppression, right? Because if we are together and we really understand again how institutions oppress all of us, including service providers, because for many of us, we are doing more work than what the government pays for, or we do it with passion and commitment, but it takes a lot of work, right? And what I tell the majority of people I supervise is that when you apply for this job, are you aware that you're applying to deal with pain and suffering? You know, and that our work is to bring hope and transformation when there is pain and suffering. And it's huge. You know, I have a lot of respect and admiration for all of you, for all of us who do this work, because understanding how the systems work is not that easy to invite hope and transformation and to face barriers if we don't work together. So yeah, that's key.
If I can jump in there, like really nodding along as I hear everybody, I think collaboration is so powerful, and it allows us to break those silos and work alongside each other. And I think the other piece I often think about is our role as individuals or individual organization is not to centralize ourselves in clients' lives, rather creating a structure within which the healing can take place, right? And so when we do that collaboratively, we fill those gaps and kind of allow that healing to happen, and for clients to really honor their agency and move forward in their healing journey on their own too. One of the things I was reflecting on is on the notion of collaboration is we also need to collaborate with clients and centralize their own voices in accessing care and accessing systems as well. And so this can happen maybe on an individual basis when we co-create plan of action, or, you know, or we're like intentionally getting feedback from clients. But one of the other ways that has been successful within DIVERSEcity actually is within our Roots of Safety program. We actually have advisory panel, which comprises of survivors themselves. And so they guide the work that we do. I recently had an opportunity to participate or be part of the panel, and it was very, very powerful. I don't have any other words to explain it. And so we really need to bring their voices to a fore and inform the system to respond to the needs a little bit better, right? Like as service providers, we can do the best we can and share and advocate. But if we bring the voices to a fore, I think hopefully that will lead to more of a systems change. So collaboration can happen in different ways too.
Oh, tough to follow up with all the brilliant things that have already been touched on. So at Surrey Women's Center, we definitely prioritize collaboration with community partners. One of the main sources of collaboration that we have is within the Surrey RCMP and the Domestic Violence Unit and the Special Victims Unit. The power of that collaboration, from my perspective, in terms of providing care for survivors, is having that higher level of accountability of those systems that are seeing to the care of survivors. So being able to hopefully hold those systems accountable when they are failing survivors. So for me, that's kind of the power that I see with it. How we could facilitate better collaboration. I also had including survivors in that process. From my perspective, that's very important and often overlooked. We're making decisions and collaborating on people's lives, and so including them on that, and really prioritizing consent-based care and making sure that survivors really understand the high level of information sharing that may be required, and making sure that they're consenting to that. The last thing in terms of facilitating better collaboration is making sure that those that are at the table have the ability to make decisions and elicit change. I find sometimes it can be very hard, more so at like coordination tables, like for communities and things like that, is that those that are at the table really don't have the capacity for change. And so pushing for decision makers to be at those tables when we're collaborating about bigger issues of gender-based violence is really important. Thanks for what everyone else said. I echo it, I high-five it, all brilliant. Thank you.
Love it. So much wisdom. Thank you so much for sharing that. And one piece I want to rescue among all of that amazing knowledge is to ensure that we are seeing people that are accessing services as our main consultants and the experts over their lives. That's one of the biggest shifts that, as Samantha just said, is often overlooked in the journey towards creating change. So thank you, everyone. Next question that we have for you is, working within the anti-violence sector comes with tremendous complexities and challenges. What or who drives your continued engagement in this work?
Okay, I'll start.
Thank you.
I'll be the brave soul. I think this is a great question. We end up talking in this sector specifically, we end up talking a lot about burnout, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue. And like I find it that we rarely, if ever, we talk about vicarious resiliency, which is the growth that helping professionals experience when they witness the resilience and the thriving of victims or survivors, under very adverse circumstances. And so I have seen firsthand how the existence of culturally competent services could drastically shift and transform survivors' lives. And I've also seen how impactful it is to have someone who speaks their language and understand their culture could help them in this very difficult experience. And just to be clear, very clear, I'm not romanticizing this work whatsoever, because it is definitely intense and the emotional labor is very, very real and it completely get to you. But what I'm trying to say, it's also very rewarding to have the privilege of walking alongside of the survivors and being there during this journey and being there for them during this journey. And also witnessing the impact of having, again, the appropriate resources and services. And I also always remind myself that if we all say this is a tough work and draining work, who's left to do it? We all complain about lack of services and gaps in services. But then for me, I do want to be part of the solution, even for a short period, even if I don't know, Rosa, you're amazing. You're going to do it for the rest of your life. I'm not quite sure, but for the meantime, I do want to be part of the solution. One important thing is I have learned a lot from the women I worked with, and I think I really perceive this learning and this privilege of being with them during this journey as a gift So I truly welcome and embrace this gift. And I think that's what keep me going. But again, I'm not romanticizing how tough it is, but then at the same time, we see the impact. And I think this is very, very rewarding. And like, we can't change something if we don't like start ourselves, I guess, and having boundaries, obviously. But yeah, I think I'm gonna stop here, but that's what keeps me going.
Thank you, Zainab. That's great. Who would like to go next? Syma.
I think for myself, I'm echoing a lot of what Zainab has already mentioned. This work is very difficult at times. It can be very emotionally and physically draining as well, as we all know. But for myself, what keeps me going, I think the biggest thing is what I learned from the clients and their passion to make changes in their lives and change their situation, and what gives me passion to support them. I think that's how I feel. So I've worked with clients who have been so resilient and so amazing and tried so hard and faced multiple barriers, and still been resilient and been able to power through and make positive changes. And I think for me, that's amazing to see. It's something I had not seen before I worked with survivors. And so I think that gives me hope. I feel like because we are able to provide culturally sensitive services, the impact of that is tremendous and life-changing for many of our clients. So for me, continuing this work is personal passion, it's professional passion, and I just, the seeing the impact and seeing the results and seeing how people and survivors can actually continue their lives away from the abuse, children can continue their lives away from the abuse and actually move forward in a positive direction it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And what Zainab said, not to romanticize any of this, it is very tough work, but that keeps me going and that keeps me motivated, and I hope to stay motivated, and I think it will be that way for a very long time.
And I see Richa.
Yes, just really nodding along with Syma and Zainab's responses. I think in reflecting on this question, I think my instinctive answer was like clients and service users, that's what drives my engagement. But then I was like, oh, that might be too simplistic of an answer. I think if I were to make an assumption, those of us who are in this sector are impacted ourselves by violence in one way or another, right? And so I think my first driving force is people we service whose lives are impacted and continue to be impacted by violence. It's the lived and living experiences. The system within which our lives are situated and the history of colonization and ongoing impacts of patriarchy, I think it creates this environment within which sometimes violence can actually thrive. And I think fresh out of school, social work school, I think knowing that we cannot change the system overnight was such a difficult realization. But I think over time I've learned, and again, that power of collaboration comes in, right? Like, and that's what drives me as well, being able to work alongside folks who have same values, incredible passion for social justice work, anti-oppressive practice, like just like the panel members here, right? Like that has helped me grow, not just as a practitioner, but I think even just as a human being too. So the ability to learn, unlearn, relearn it's probably selfish, but it's like something I value for my own growth as well. And I think collaboration leads to meaningful advocacy, system-based advocacy, and hopefully eventually we can change the system. So that idea also really, really drives me. The other thing I was thinking about actually is something Andrea always says. You always say there's no shortage of suffering. And unfortunately, that's very, very true, right? We have our jobs because people are suffering. And so my hope is that we're able to shift that away a little bit, like shift the ways in which suffering happens and move towards healing through our work. And lastly, I do want to share this on a very personal level. My driving force is actually my grandmothers who passed away, have passed on, and they had suffered in many ways. I think unknowing to us, the grandchildren, but they had suffered. And so But I think they taught us the value of being strong, and not just in a traditional sense of being vocal advocates, but a quiet resistance and leadership. And so I think that drives me, knowing that, their blood kind of, runs through my body in a way. And so hopefully it'll continue to guide me as well. But I'll stop there.
I can go. So, in my country, if I were doing the work that I'm doing now, I don't know if I will be alive, because it's dangerous, right? To support, in my case, women who experience gender-based violence, it's very dangerous. And also there is no money to pay people to do this kind of work, right? So I always say that I feel privileged that I get paid to do something I love, and that I get paid to affect change in the lives of others, right? And then I also make the joke that in my country, I used to be chased by the police, and in Canada, I chase the police to do their work, right? And again, it's not perfect, but I have that access to that power to challenge systems. And I couldn't do this work if I were not working from an intersectional feminist anti-oppression analysis. That's what sustains me, being able to really address what's going on and the different systems that oppress people, because as we know, the people who come to see us, they are not the problem. The problem is created by people in power who want us to continue being oppressed, whether because we are displaced from our countries and we have to go to a different place, or because someone benefits from gender-based violence, right? I always say there is a benefit to someone, because if institutions and everybody were to affect change, and together we wanted to stop that and make change, we could do it sooner than later, right? So what keeps me going is that the people who come to see me, they are amazing, right? Like, they are struggling in the same way that I struggle, maybe with different layers of barriers, but they also bring a lot of knowledge, a lot of strength, and they just need a safe place where they can rest, regain their energy, and keep going, right? And affect change. And the good thing about being in the field for so long is that I get to see generations. And then, like recently, I had a young woman who sent me a letter saying that I had supported her mother when she was 8 years old. And she said, you don't know the change that you made in our lives because of all the support that my mother received. And so the letter was beautiful. I couldn't believe it, right? And I thought, it's not about me. It's just about me being in that path, in that journey. So yeah, so it's beautiful. And again, it's exhausting, and it's not, as someone said, we are not romanticizing. But in a way, I romanticize, because it's so beautiful to see how people have all these skills to transform their lives.
So when I first looked at this question, my instinctual answer was, because I can't let the oppressors win. I won't let them be, I won't be beat by them. So what keeps me engaged and drives me in this work is the profound belief in the power of social change and grassroots organizing. We are living in a time where there's so much erosion of the basic rights of women, of gender diverse populations, that for me, the time is now to get busy and to really start a resurgence of resistance. And I guess the last thing that I want to say is, like, I've been a very big believer of no woman is free until all are free. So I'm just going to keep going until all are free. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for your ongoing contributions, because this work is hard, but just hearing how you sustain yourself, how you nurture yourself, and knowing that we cannot do this alone is such a great key reminder for all of us to keep going. And yes, grandmothers and ancestors, Very, very powerful. I have our last question before I pass it back to the audience, or even among yourselves if you have any questions. Here is the last question. What are you most proud of in relation of the work that you do in preventing, disrupting, and ending violence? What legacy are you hoping to leave behind?
I think for myself, and this is kind of in relation to the last question as well, kind of, yeah, the end of the last question. One of the reasons why I'm feeling very engaged with my work and something that I'm hoping to leave behind is the fact that in my community, gender-based violence, abuse is, still in some ways considered taboo to speak about. It's not open. People are not comfortable discussing it. It's not widely, discussed. There's not much dialogue. And I have honestly noticed in the last few years, I would say, couple of years, that there has been a lot more dialogue around this topic in our community. Women are speaking out, families are speaking out. They are looking at preventative measures. We are looking at different ways of having more resources in the community itself. So I am actually very proud and feeling very hopeful, I think, for the future in terms of education for our community. And so I think that is a driving force for myself. And that is why I hope to spread the knowledge and get as much feedback from our clients and their families going forward. And that's kind of the legacy that I would like to leave. That's the little piece that I would like to leave, is bringing this topic forward, creating more dialogue and more comfort rather than discomfort around speaking about these issues.
I think if I can echo sort of what Syma said, I think, yeah, definitely. I think there was so much, continues to be, I think, still shame and stigma attached to coming forward. And I think those systems are alive and well, unfortunately. But I also find in the last 2 years, I think perhaps because of COVID too, things have come forward and we're actively discussing. There's more funding in the sector coming forward as well. And so people are seeing the need to have open dialogue and conversation about, violence generally too. One thing I'm hoping for is that we can shift away from just not looking at services for women, which is, I'm not saying that it's not important, and it continues to be important, prime to the services that we provide. But if we don't focus on the system around, survivors in terms of family systems, and we need to shift that focus into looking at more family system-based, more community-based approach to violence prevention. And I think looking at what communities bring in terms of healing. I think there's existing knowledge already in communities that we service, in cultural communities, ethno-cultural communities. And what are those solutions that have worked within their countries of origin, in their communities here, and how do we then bring that forward and bring it into the ways in which we provide support? So I think, what would be exciting, and I think, is that in my current role, I have the privilege of being part of program designs. And so designing programs that meets the need, I can't even speak anymore. English is not my first language, everybody. Meet the needs of clients and meet them where they are as well, right? And I think continue to have that flexibility in how we provide support. So not looking at rigidity, but really meeting each individual clients and their unique needs as well. So that's sort of, yeah.
I would say at Surrey Women's Center, one thing that I'm particularly proud of the service delivery that we have for clients is the partnerships that we have with Surrey RCMP, with MCFD and Fraser Health. So with MCFD and Surrey RCMP, we actually have community-based victim services working out of those locations and collaborating, and I would say educating those partners on trauma-informed care, cultural competent care. And so for me, that's something that I see as the result of many, many years of work of women before me. So I definitely am very proud of those relationships that we've made, and the legacy that I hope to leave is that we expand on those relationships so that the system responds better to those that come forward about gender-based violence.
Yeah, I think I really resonate with what Samantha, Syma, and Richa have said already. And just to like echoing and add on what Richa was saying, making sure that all these services are truly and genuinely informed by the communities being impacted. And actually having them as equal participants in developing a lot of these services. And so what I'm hoping is that in the future, when we're saying culturally competent or culturally safe spaces, is not just a buzzword or like a term that we use or attach to any service. It would actually transform to a practice that's that's an integrated practice. And reflected in the way that the service is being delivered. And so I think that's really important because a lot of services are, unfortunately, this term is being used, but it's not really reflected in the practice. So it's very important to, in the future, making sure that all women are able to access these services because they're truly, culturally competent and understanding and meet their needs. And I think this starts with making sure that these services are centering the needs of survivors, and they're truly informed by their voices. Yeah.
So yeah, I echo everything. And yeah, Battered Women Support Services has been providing services for over 40 years. And the women who started the organization started with doing it on their own without any salary. And they were doing just one support group. And it's my understanding that for 10 years, they were doing it on a volunteer basis. And then they got their first paid job after 10 years. So now we have a number of programs and over 100 volunteers, and we have done a lot, right? So my hope is just that we just keep going. And in my case, I'm just trying to train new generations, right? Because we have a way to go. So I just hope to transfer some of the knowledge, because a lot of the knowledge I have comes from the women who have accessed my support, and they are the ones who have. So I just have accumulated that information in my own hard disk, and then I just passing that to new generations. So that's my hope, that people keep going.
Thank you all. And yes, Rosa, let's get the hard disk. A lot to download. So, thank you, everyone. It is 12:25, and I want to thank you all, because I think we need to take these opportunities to really bring a lot of props and love and care, and show you how much we appreciate the work that you're doing, that you're choosing to show up for every day, because this is a choice that we're doing. It's not something that we're forced to, it is a choice. So thank you once again for your wisdom, for your brilliance, and your willingness to take time away from your busy schedules to come and share with us what drives you and what your hopes are. I'm going to check, there's no questions right now from the audience, but this is your last minute. You have 2 minutes to ask one last question. If not, we're going to start wrapping up. So I'm going to do a quick round. Any hands up for questions? Okay, going once, going twice, going thrice. Thank you, Aris, for being so engaged. And I see Nina. Sorry, hi, Nina. The floor is yours. And then Shavina.
Thank you. This is beautiful. I echo everything that was said, and wonderful questions. I just it's not so much a question, it's just kind of how you're wrapping up. The last little piece was all about the project that I'm privileged and honored to be part of with DIVERSEcity. So survivor-centered systems of care. So that's kind of what I will be working with survivors and drivers, and look at ways to engage systems of care, to hear our voices and hear their voices. And I'm so excited that that's how we ended this presentation. But I will be reaching out to some of these beautiful people that have talked today and see how I can gain your support and assistance, and also offer that support and assistance, and see where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, for the reminder. And I thought I saw Shavina's hand. Shavina's still
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, folks. Thank you so much. This is great, and I'm really appreciative that you are able to take the time out and do this diversity talk. My question is, what are your thoughts in creating allyship with men in doing this work?
Go ahead first, if that's okay. This is something that has always been on the back of my mind. There was a workshop I did in 2021, and much of the focus on that was a lot of workshops around preventing domestic violence. What are the supports offered to men? So I know we're always focused on looking at resources for survivors, but I would like the community as a whole to shift our thoughts on what are we doing for preventative care? What are we doing to educate, provide resources to those who have other issues and maybe potentially engaging in domestic violence? How can we mitigate those risks and issues? It's something that I'm always thinking about, and I'm really hoping that, and I know that there has been a shift in that direction where we are seeing more programs being offered to men, for youth as well. But I think that there's a ton of work to be done in that area. And I do think that that's something that we need to look at is we have great resources for people who are experiencing domestic violence. What are we doing to mitigate that?
I just wanted to jump in there if it's okay. I completely agree with Syma. I think we've been seeing tremendous need for supports for men and boys as well. And this is something that has come up actually through our survivor advisory panel as well. And yes, the prevention lens as well. I think one of the things that I think often gets overlooked potentially is we centralize safety of survivors quite a bit, right? And in that process, sometimes we forget that there's also relationship and love with their partners. Even when it's abusive and toxic, it's very difficult to leave that situation. And so could there be an approach to healing that happens as a relationship? Could there be an allyship, as you mentioned, Shabina, that could be created with other men so men know how to exist within the system? That could be difficult sometimes as well. Can we look at historical trauma for men as well? Because we cannot just look at survivors and not change the systems around them. And so definitely men are definitely a huge part of that conversation. And hopefully we'll have more programming available as well.
I know we don't have time, so I'm not gonna talk because this question needs hours to unpack. But I'm just gonna quickly share a resource. One of the organizations that I worked with, or not directly work with, but I know of, I think they're called Next Gen Man, and they do provide great workshops and education and advocacy when it comes to educating especially boys, and I think men as well, around consent, gender-based violence. And so, I think, unfortunately, there are not that many, as both Richa and Syma mentioned, there are not so many services or community efforts around that. And again, this could take hours to decompress and look at the roots issues, but allyship is great. And we need to focus more on providing and making these resources accessible to men and boys.
Thank you,
Zainab,
Zainab. I agree with that, and I know we don't have. We are finishing. I just want to say that I know some colleagues who offer services for men, and they have really hard to get men to access their services. And the ones who come, who are core mandated, they don't want to hear what it means to abuse power and all of that. So. We have a way to go with men taking responsibility and acknowledging, because there are services, right? Sometimes we as women say, oh, we need more services for men. But I know a number of services where they don't go and they don't use them and change is not happening. So I think the conversation, as Zainab said, is a long conversation about educating younger generations about gender expectations, gender roles, and gender-based violence, and it's possible. I know with younger generations, change is possible. So that's it.
I echo what everyone says. I'm mindful of time, so I just echo what everyone said.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our audience for bringing such great questions forward. There has been some resources shared in the chat, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Diverse Talks. And have a wonderful day. It's sunny out here in East Vancouver. I hope it's sunny wherever you are. Thank you. Stay safe, and look forward to continued collaboration.